ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
When Claude Robinson got out of jail in 2006, he felt it was going to be the moment that he turned things around. Claude had inherited a life-changing amount of money, $60,000 from his parents, and also got a rare spot at Rainbow Lodge, a home for newly released prisoners in inner-city Sydney. Somewhere designed to help men like him find a path back to regular life. But Claude didn't stay long. He left Rainbow Lodge, checked himself into the Astoria Hotel in King's Cross, and over just a few weeks, Claude spent that $60,000 on heroin for himself and his girlfriend. And then he ended up back inside. That was his rock bottom. But the next time Claude was released from prison, he did turn his life around. And he is now the manager at Rainbow Lodge, doing his best to help men just like he was 18 years ago. And a heads up, particularly if you've got kids around, Claude's story does involve discussion of some tough subjects, including drugs and crime. Hi, Claude.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
What time does your phone start ringing in the morning?
Yeah, it pings early.
What kind of things are pinging when you get a call at 6:30 in the morning?
Oh, it might be, one of the men's, the staff have done a check and one of the men's not there. Or, if we're doing a transport, one of the staff just saying, that we're leaving now, that we're safe, we're on our way to pick someone up. Or someone might be, simple thing, someone might be just messaging, that I'm sick today, I can't come in. Yeah. But I'm actually on call 24/7. So, but I'm very lucky, at Rainbow. I have a really amazing staff. So, they don't call me when the strawberries run out.
Is there such a thing as a typical day at Rainbow Lodge?
No, there isn't. You plan things. You do hope that things will work out, but we work with people. And the people we work with, are hugely traumatised, and they're in a period of flux, expectation and change. So it can be quite terrifying for them. So, we have to take that into consideration.
How many men live at Rainbow Lodge at any one time?
Currently up to 10 in the house, and then we might have others come and do the day program.
So that's a lot of personalities to juggle. Did you grow up in a big family?
I did, big Catholic family. So I have 5 brothers and sisters. I'm number 5 out of the 6.
What were things like at home for you as a young bloke?
So, look, I grew up 5 or 6 children, and the reality was I don't think my mum and dad were bad people. They did the best with what they had and they didn't have great teachers. They were Catholics. Contraception wasn't a thing. Because look at the older 4, and they probably had enough resources to look after the first 4 but not the last 2, if I'm honest about that. So there's a lot of stress. They had to work all the time.
What kind of role did Catholicism, religion, play in your family?
Oh, huge. Had a huge impact. Like we were, Irish Catholic with some French in us, and the church played a big role. And I think it's hard if you didn't grow up in Australia in the 70s and early 80s, it may be difficult to understand the unfettered power and control that the Catholic Church had. If the priest rolled up to your house, you just let him in. You would give him dinner, in my suburb, alcohol, or if he wanted to take your child somewhere, that would be perceived as a privilege, so... you have to have that context when you think about it. So, yeah.
Would the priest come to your place?
Yeah, the priest would come to my place more. I would see him leaving the neighbours. I still remember, one time I was coming back from footy or something, and a couple of the men from the neighbourhood were carrying him to the car because he was so drunk. Because that's what he would do. He would go around to people's houses and drink a couple of sherries or a glass of wine, and, he'd be paralytic by the end of the day. Or, I saw him, another one, leaving someone's house, while the husband was at work, that type of thing, and I was I was an altar boy, so I went through the whole Catholic higher, thing you did as a child. It was tough, yeah. It played a huge part.
What about at school? What were things like at primary school for you, Claude?
I never fitted in my family, and I had issues also at school. I know today, that I'm dyslexic and I have a different way of learning. But when I grew up, I started going to school in 1976. So there was no understanding of learning difficulties. I was a bad kid, in primary school. We had this teacher, Mr. Dyson, who was an amazing musician and had some really good things, but he would make me sit at the front of the classroom. We had the old wooden desks and he had the big metre-long wooden rulers. And, if there was noise of that, he'd just turn around and smash my knuckles with the ruler, even if I did it or not. And that was the environment that we were brought up in, and I was always in trouble, I was expelled.
What kind of stuff got you expelled?
I think what happened to me, and this relates to the Catholicism and adults, so I realised that the adults in my life weren't congruent. What they said and what they did were two different things, and for whatever reason, I'm talking, I worked this out at 6.5, that impacted me hugely because it made my world really unsafe. And the other thing was, if I behaved the same way 2 days in a row, the outcome could be vastly different. And I know those things today because I work in the field and I have children, how damaging they are to children to not have that stability and regularity and stuff. And I think that comes down to having my parents being stressed, having too many kids. So, that set me on this path of that I just came to this decision that the only way I was going to get through life, and it's frightening to think of this, that I had this belief at 7, was that I needed to look after myself and do whatever that took, and I didn't have to care about anyone else because no one cared about me, and that set me on this 30-year destructive path, So, and obviously all the authority in my life was from adults. So I just rebelled because I just thought they were full of crap. You didn't believe them. It wasn't true. If they were telling me to do this, but what were they doing?
How old were you when you left school, if school was not a good place to be?
So I actually got permission. So I left school, I think I was 14 years and 9 months. My parents had to give permission because I went to do a chef's apprenticeship because I'd worked. My brother was a chef and had been in his own restaurants and that for many years. So at the Christmas holidays, I'd worked in the restaurant with him and his mates washing dishes and sort of jumped in there and I had a bit of a flair for it.
What kind of environment was that for a 14-year-old?
Exciting. In those days, because I grew up in a place called Frankston, pretty horrible place, in Melbourne, working class, a lot of housing commission. And the trains used to finish at 11 o'clock, so I had to move to my grandma's in Glen Huntly. And I was one of the only white kids or Aussie kids in Lygon Street back, and this is like 1986.
So when you describe that, Claude, that's one possible crossroad, isn't it? Like you could have gone down that path. I could be talking to Claude, the restaurateur or chef, that was leading that way. So what derailed you?
I was really young and there was no 24, like all the shops were closed on a Sunday. There was nothing to do. So I started going to I would go to the illegal gambling places above Lygon Street because that's where people went, after hours and, and they'd give me a couple of vinos and things like that. And
you were drinking from a teenager.
Yeah.
What about drugs? When did you start using drugs?
After I stopped cooking, I went back to school again, not because I wanted to go back to school, because my mates were there. And, where I grew up, like I started sniffing glue and smoking marijuana, but drinking and smoking marijuana, in Australia, it's so normal, especially where I do, and even today, it's so normalised. And even with drinking, I vividly remember it was my older sister's 21st birthday and I got, violently drunk and passed out, and I was probably 14 or something, in my vomit, and her boyfriend at the time, put me to bed and cleaned it up. And it frightens me today because, when I woke up the next day, my parents didn't come and say to me, wow, that's really concerning. I got a slap on the back, your first spew, and again, if you didn't grow up in 70s Australia with that drinking male, it was so normalised. We would go to my grandma for Christmas night, and I still remember it. You had to wait till you were about 10 or 11 before you could stay with the men out in this carport. She lived in Carrum, still had an outside toilet for most of it that the truck would come to. And you would go inside there, the men would drop the eskies, go inside, pay homage, to my grandma, get the obligatory pair of socks and the lotto ticket. And they would go back outside, drink until they fought with each other or whatever they did. And I had to stay inside with the tea and scones with the women. And when I hated it.
And what age were you able to go out there?
9, because I had to be, I think, over 10 to be able to go out with the men, But I would go to the pub with my dad and have a shandy.
As you say, Claude, that use of alcohol and even marijuana was to a degree normalised, but not heroin, not hard drugs. When did that come into your life? How did that first come in?
I got into the music industry. I did pretty well in that, and that really did introduce, because where I lived, everyone drunk, smoked. There might have been, I call it trucker speed, the old style speed, not the ice that they have today, was around, you know what I mean? And it was popular because you could take that and drink more. So they liked that sort of culture. But when I got into music and I started to go into the city and living in St Kilda and all that, I was introduced to a whole new range of drugs and a whole new level of use and availability. It really did change. So I was introduced to ecstasy, acid, my friends were heroin addicts and heroin was accessible, cocaine. I had access to as much cocaine as I could afford. So once I came into that sphere of the music, it really changed everything, and I got introduced to drug dealers who, were selling pounds of marijuana and I could get ounces of coke, probably a kilo if I wanted to. So really it was a game changer.
What do you remember about the first time you used heroin?
I vividly remember it. Wow. I was with my girlfriend at the time. I was dealing drugs by this stage. So I was living in this big house on Hoddle Street in East Melbourne. I'd been on cocaine for a number of days and not sleeping. And as I said, I had a friend who was a heroin addict and a heroin dealer. And I'd sell him speed and stuff. And he had morals, he would say, I'll never sell you heroin. You don't want to be like me. Him and his wife were both heroin addicts. But they sold and they lived and they paid a mortgage, so there wasn't a criminal, street criminal attached to it. I was really paranoid and off the cocaine, and my girlfriend said, we should get some heroin and this sounds insane, to take the edge off it so we can have some more cocaine. So I rung my friend and I'd bought heroin off him, but he'd asked for other people. And I said, no, this is for me. And he's like, no, and I said, and I explained. And he said, yeah, that makes sense. So I got some heroin. I still remember it to this day. I was standing at the back door of that house. My girlfriend was on the couch and I was smoking a cigarette and power vomiting. And I just thought, this is the best feeling I've ever had in my whole life, and I'm going to do everything to feel this way.
Can you put it into words? What did it feel like?
When I think about it now, it was like, having your grandma and your mother being smothered in love while having the most amazing orgasm from sex at the same time. Like it was so. The Chinese call it chasing the dragon.
Because what you're always wanting that feeling again.
And it never comes back. That initial. It's so and I've taken all of the drugs, but there's nothing like heroin. There's a reason we use it for medicine, and it's so important because its powers are so strong.
And when you describe it, it's an emotional high it was giving you, it sounds like.
People who haven't used drugs always go, but how could you do that when you know the consequences? And I go, you just have no idea, all that feeling of anxiety and trouble of life or not being enough, it was just washed away in a nanosecond. And to put it into context, a little bit later down the track, I didn't come from a family where affection and love was shown. I think, the first time my mum told me she loved me, I was 26 and she was putting me on a train to detox at my brother's in Queensland. There was, compared to the way I smother my daughter and tell her to the point that she's annoyed. So it wasn't like that. So you know what I mean? So, and I never felt comfortable or okay, and suddenly in that instant, but everything it gave me in that moment, it removed 1,000-fold over the next, 15, 16 years.
How quickly did you become addicted in your sense to heroin? Was it immediate?
Within 6 months, the couple that had given it to me, I'd robbed them. I had a recording studio. I'd shot all that, everything. It was Now I know because I'd grown up, I had so much trauma and I don't know if self-hatred's the word to explain it, but just not, I never quite felt right in the world. I remember, I was dealing drugs and I'd be out and, I'd be surrounded by, lots of people, but so lonely.
So what kind of things were you doing to finance that addiction?
So initially I was dealing drugs to do that, so I sold cocaine and speed and marijuana. So again, it wasn't an issue because the people I was dealing drugs to weren't doing street crime. So they weren't per se known to the police, they were dealing. So it was a whole different level. I used to sell a lot of cocaine to the legal fraternity in Melbourne and all that. So, people who had disposable income. So so it's quite a safe way to do it. But the thing was, the moment my addiction took over, all the people that were giving me those drugs to sell, I was a liability. And they all dried up. I ended up owing this guy $70,000 and, they run me down and put a gun down my throat. And, that didn't stop me. But, the stream of drugs that I could sell to them all dried up. And so I had to go into, street crime or more desperate crimes. Yeah.
In 2001, the law caught up with you and you were sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Where were you sent? Which prison?
I went to a few. So the first prison I went to, as most people do if you're arrested in Sydney, you go out to Silverwater to the Metropolitan Remand and Reception Centre, commonly known as MRRC. It's funny, I say to people, prison's a deterrent till you go to prison.
What do you mean?
If you don't know about prison and things, it's quite fearful, but you walk through the door and you go, oh, there's all the people from the crime, and the other thing, there's a reason humans rule the world. We're the most adaptable species on Earth, so we adapt. Humans survive and some even thrive in those environments, and this is why I say, punishing people doesn't work. You put them in there, I used drugs, every day I was in jail and, I knew people. And I worked out a way to survive. So I went from there and there was a strike on, I still remember it. So all the non-commissioned officers were on strike. So what we call pippers, they have pips on their shoulders or crowns. So officers, so they're not allowed to strike. So they were running the jail. So they moved us to, and I still vividly remember this, they moved me to Parramatta, which was open then. And they had to walk us in because the guys were rioting, so they were burning stuff out the windows. And this is in 4, 5 and 6 wings, like a quadrangle thing. And they had all shields, and we were under the shields as they walked us to the cells because they were burning, because they'd been locked in for like a week or 10 days. Yeah, so that was my entry into Parramatta, and I was there for a while I went to trial, and then I was stabbed at Parramatta by some Lebanese guys. While I was there, I'd shoot a wire over with my cellmate and bring drugs into the jail. And one night we got it caught on the razor and it fell into the safe zone, and I was pretty smart in jail, so I didn't make it known what I was doing. So, there was some Lebanese guys in the cell below, so the officers believed it was them, and they confronted me over it saying, and stabbed me. Then I went from there back to Silverwater, where I finished my trial and was sentenced. Then I was sent to Cessnock, and then at Cessnock I hit a prison guard. I was at Cessnock a while, and I had a disagreement with a prison guard, and I hit him. So from there I was sent to Goulburn, which was a punishment prison. So I spent nearly 3 years in Goulburn, and that was an eye-opener. That was, there's prison and then there's Goulburn.
What do you remember about the day you arrived at Goulburn?
So once I hit the officer at Cessnock, I was segregated, so I was away, and any time I was outside my cell, I was cuffed in my hands and feet and had 2 guards next to me everywhere. So they took me from Cessnock back to Silverwater, the same there, before taking me to Goulburn. When I rolled up at Goulburn, I still remember going into the area commander's office, Big Bernie. He's dead now. He's a huge man. I think he had a $2,000 seat because he was ginormous. He was a big man. And he told the guards to take my cuffs off and leave the room. And I thought, oh, wow. And he was that big he couldn't get off his seat, thankfully. But he said to me, Robbo, if I could get off this seat, I'd punch your head through the wall, and he had my record up. And it wasn't pleasant, spit at officers, fighting, assault officer. And, he was really clear. He said, this is not jail anymore. This is Goulburn. I own you.
Were you scared?
Actually, in that moment I was. And you hear all the stories about Goulburn and all that sort of stuff.
What other kind of prisoners were there? How was it different from...
Well, then the next thing was they said to me, it's segregated via race. And I was like, what? And they said, so, we have the... I'll use the language they use. You've got the Kuriyag, the Lebyard, Aussie Islander, Aussie Asian, and then the Putrids. The protection. So that was Shorty, the guys who'd done the Anita Cobby murders and all that sort of thing, were up in the super protection area. And this is the officer telling me this. This is the language that they used. He said, so your choice is Aussie Islander or Aussie Asian. I choose the Aussie Asian. The islands are big boys. And I'd always got on well with the Asians. I did a lot of business with them. But then at that stage, I was on like 150 milligrams of methadone. So they took me to 2 wing, which was the Koori wing though. And I thought, what is going on here? And they put me up the end in a cell and they left me there for 2 or 3 days with no methadone. Because it was a punishment. They wanted to tell that they were now in control of everything that I did. And, I just happened to know the guy who was a sweeper because there was no... perspex on my window, so it was really cold, and he'd slip in a cardboard box and they'd come in and go, that's contraband, and take it off me, and they just gave me the Regulation 1 grey prison blanket and the Bible. So I was, hanging out off methadone for 3 days, trying to read the Bible. Yeah, it was pretty terrifying. I was pretty sick, and then they took me out and they dosed me with my methadone and they put me in the Aussie Asian yard.
What did they make of you, the Asian Australian guys, you joining their yard?
They asked you where you come from. I said, I'd been in sets, so they obviously knew something had gone down. You're in Goulburn, how'd you get here? What happened? And I said, I hit a guard here. So the moment I said that, they just looked after me.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. So that when I went in that day, I had a radio, cigarettes, I had everything.
Because you'd hit a guard, you're a hero in the yard.
Yeah, I deserved, all right, I could be there. It was okay, and they knew what it was like. So they knew I didn't even have to tell them, and they could tell. Like I'd just been dosed my methadone for the first time, after I was so sick, and they knew the system and what had potentially happened to me. So, yeah, they looked after me, and, what I learned was that you had to, because that's all you had. And it's actually the safest prison I did, apart from you had to shower altogether the first day. And this is what prison's like. There was the big drought was on. So this is 2002-3. Goulburn was in real trouble. Like they were talking about closing the jail and moving people out. The drought was so bad. So we had 10 minutes to shower 65 guys. So 3 of you had to be in each shower thing. So one would get wet, the other would lather up. And I walked in there and, the guy behind me, and everyone, you're all naked, and, and he rubbed his penis against me, and another one of those pivotal moments. And this is what jail's like, So I just turned around and told him to F off and pushed him away, and they all just started laughing, and he slapped me on the back and said, you're all right. In hindsight, when you think about it, if I hadn't have done that, I would have been perceived completely differently. And that white power guy is another shower over with his boyfriend lathering him up. It's a surreal place to be in.
Tell me what happened one day when you went to visit the prison dentist.
Which was a luxury in prison. If anyone who's been in prison, like most of my teeth are missing or fake now. It's one of because there's no dental care, so they just pull them out. Yeah, I was waiting in the dentist, and obviously in Goulburn you have next door built onto it's actually part of the prison is Supermax. So we're sitting in there, and the Supermax guys wear orange jumpsuits, and the squad guys come in, and there was a guy. I was waiting in the waiting room. There was a guy in there, and they just told him to get out, and they brought in Ivan Milat because he's in Supermax, so they don't want them out of the Supermax area for any longer than they have to. And they brought him in to the dentist and, did whatever they did to him and then took him out. And in a Goulburn, unlike some jails, you don't really speak to the guards. And I remember everyone just going, wow. I don't know if there's evil, but the place went icy. He certainly had a terrible energy, and we all, even the guards, were just like, wow. So I just thought, how did I get here? Yeah, drinking and smoking pot as a kid and growing up. And though I didn't change my life from that moment, in hindsight, it was one of those pivotal moments when I just thought, wow, I don't belong here. Like, these people kill people. They don't even take drugs. Like, this is a whole, and it did start a process over a long time.
Were you in touch with your mum and dad while you were in prison?
So my mum had died at the start of that sentence. I left Melbourne at the end, around 2000, because my mum had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, so incurable cancer. She wouldn't have morphine in the house because her son was a drug addict. And I was on bupe then or something. I was clean. I wasn't using. And I just thought, I'd caused so much damage that I thought it was really unfair that she was going to die, that she would do that in pain. So I just thought, I need to leave. So I went in Queensland, ended up in Sydney, ended up in prison. So she died while I was in prison. I never got to say goodbye or go to her funeral or anything. And that's not the prison officials or that's my fault. I take complete responsibility for that. I made choices that had consequences. So at the end in Goulburn, my dad died. And the only reason I found out my dad died was I went to pick up my buy-up one day and it wasn't there. The reality was I spoke to my dad because I needed the $50 every week to get to buy-up, if I'm completely honest. It was a pretty shit way to live, but that's what it's like. And he would always put it in, so it wasn't there. And I thought, oh, that's weird. And because Goulburn's got a circle, so there's one officer that has a phone that controls your access to everything. And every time I put my hand up, because I'd hit a gut, they just told me to piss off. Those guys all lined up in that yard and rung their families and that to find out that he died. Like, that was the camaraderie that they did, and and then
the other inmates rang your home.
Rang their family, gave a number until they could find out, and they found out that he died. So they moved me back over to X-Wing after he died, I think because they felt sorry for me. They didn't want me to kill myself. And I just, I thought I was sharing a cell. And this is how insane and sad it is that I used my dad's death to get a one out. My own cell, which is huge, much better than sharing. Not that at that time my cellmate, he was a good bloke, but so I got my one out and they said, you're all right. And he died of a stroke, so I didn't expect it. And it was a bit, because my parents had died, I was getting my inheritance near the end of that time in Goulburn. And I spent the last 6 months there walking the yard thinking, that I was going to get this money and it was going to be that pivotal. I know this sounds crazy now, but at the time I just thought I needed a big bag of money or a big bag of dope to fix all the problems that I created in my life.
Podcast and broadcast. This is Conversations with Sarah Kanowski.
That money that you inherited, $60,000, it must have felt like a ticket to a different kind of life. Is that what you were planning for when you got out of jail?
I don't even know, actually. When I did, I thought, I could buy drugs and sell them and make money.
So you weren't thinking this is my chance to go clean? You were still in that mindset
I don't even, I could do it different. Yeah, I don't know. No. I just thought it was going to be different, or the start of something, or if I could get, sell some drugs and get enough money, then I could maybe do business or bring change. But I was so traumatised in my addiction, my thinking was certainly not rational. And I got out, and as you said it, in the intro, I ended up at Rainbow Lodge.
And what do you remember about arriving there? What kind of place did it feel like?
Well, I remember leaving Goulburn, and this is the most bizarre story because people don't understand. When you leave prison, they just give you a ticket back to where you were arrested. That's their only obligation. So they gave me a blue slip to catch a train and a Centrelink payment in cash and my birth certificate.
That's all you had? That's
all I had. And I had to walk from Goulburn prison to the train station. So I walk out the gate. They've let me out. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. I walk down the road and... This seems really strange, but when, I can't tell you where Goulburn prison is or where Cessnock prison. I don't even know where Parramatta prison is because you go in trucks. So I'm walking down the road and I just went, I don't even know where I'm going. I had to go back to the guards.
Ask for directions.
Yeah. I had to ask for directions. How do I get to the station? And he showed me, and I walked, whatever it was, the 20, 25 minutes to the station, and then I had to wait for like the XBT or whatever it was. I think I went into the RSL or something, and I had a chicken parmigiana, which was cool. I like chicken parmigianas, and I hadn't had one for a long time.
And so the train brought you back to Sydney.
Central, and then I had to walk to Rainbow Lodge. Yeah, no one to meet me, no. And I rolled up there, and the people, you know, they were nice enough, you know, and they gave me a room. And then, you know, I had to go to RPA the next day and get my methadone. You could cook some food, and I was pretty popular because I could cook. So that was pretty good. Even in jail, that served me so well. Like, I would never have to buy food. The boys would always buy food, and I would cook. In Goulburn, I cooked a mad Christmas lunch one day, you know. So, yeah, the boys would all buy all the food, and I just cooked it for them. So, you know, it's one of those things, cooking it. It served me well. So, yeah, I rolled up there, and I was on methadone, and, you know, I was getting my inheritance in like a couple of weeks after I got out, and I was all right. All right, I'm not going to use any other drugs. I'll just take my methadone. And, you know, one night I thought, I'll just go down and see who's at the cross. I'll be all right. And I went down there, and again, you know, the insanity of how irrational my thinking was, you know, I obviously ran into someone, but I was like, I have a shot of ice because I don't use ice, so it won't be a problem. It's not heroin, you know. I'm trying not to laugh. It's so insane, but that's what I thought. I had a shot of ice, and then I think I walked from King's Cross to Rainbow Lodge, which is in Glebe, 3 or 4 times that night, because every time I'd walk to Rainbow, I go, all right, I'm going home now. I walk and I have to go back. And it was all back on, you know. I got my inheritance. I ran into a girl I knew and, you know, booked into the Astoria and, you know, shot it all up on heroin and coke. And, you know, we started using it, and, you know, I kept saying, when it gets to 40,000, 30,000, you know. And, you know, that last day I woke up just so full of dread that it was all gone. You know, I robbed a cab to get to Centrelink in Leichhardt, and, you know, I did a really stupid, desperate crime, and then jumped 2 other cabs, robbed someone and got their wallet and their phone with my girlfriend. And I knew I was in trouble because my girlfriend at the time, who's unfortunately still using, said to me, "You're crazy." And I thought, oh, God, I'm in real trouble here. But, you know, I couldn't stop. So, you know, and we the police are coming down Parramatta Road, and we're in a cab, and I'm going, just drive. And the insanity was, all I needed to do was to get to King's Cross to have a shot of heroin to work out what I was going to do. And I just, in that moment, I don't know what it is, spiritual moment of clarity, call it whatever you want, but I was in King's Cross, about to score heroin. And my girlfriend tapped me and said, the undercovers across the road are looking at you. And I don't know, I just became overcome with something. I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I gave her the phone and the wallet and kissed her and said, I'm going to hand myself in. I'm going to go back to jail where it all makes sense. And I did. I walked across the road to 2 shocked undercover policemen. They obviously radioed through, and, you know, there was warrants out. I'd been on the run for parole anyway for a few weeks. And I said, this is what I've just done. And they're like, wow. And, you know, I was so defeated that, you know, the officer, you know, he said, I don't even need to cuff you. And I said, no. And we just walked down to King's Cross Police Station. And King's Cross Police Station doesn't hold you for very long. So it just has these real little dock cells, not a proper cell. And it's run by the police, not corrections. And they just put me in there. I just started breaking down crying. You know, I just thought, fuck. You know, that, you know, all that opportunity, or, you know, I just thought, what am I going to do now? But I knew that I couldn't live out in the world, and I just thought I need to go back to prison. And I know what I know now is I wanted to go back to prison because, you know, I wanted to abdicate my responsibility to someone else because I couldn't trust myself, and I couldn't look after myself. And that's one of the things that when we imprison and institutionalise people and then expect them to come back into the community, when you do that, when you imprison and institutionalise, you remove all their personal responsibility.
Where were you sent to prison?
So I went back to MRRC, waiting to go before the parole board first. I had some other charges too. And I went before the parole board. I still remember this. It was a video link. I was at MW. They put you in a room, and I spoke to my lawyer. And they spoke to me, and I said, I want to go to rehab. And I thought, you know, because when I was in the pod, I'd asked one of the officer to see alcohol and drug worker, speak to the AOD worker, and he laughs. He said, about time, Robbo. The officer said that, and I thought, story of my life, I'm the last to catch on how shit it is. Everyone else, you know what I mean? Even he thought it was just sad.
Was there an opportunity for you to go to rehab?
Well, I thought there was, because I was going to present to the parole board that I need to go, and they just, like, the hearing went for about 60 seconds. I said, no, you're not going anywhere. Like, you've been out 6, we'll see you in a year's time. Boom, and the screen went off. And the only thing that saved me was I started crying again. So the guard didn't want to come in because, they're not used to that. And I had a phone because my lawyer was in the parole hearing. And I grabbed the phone and, I said to my lawyer, like, I said, I need something. I know, I can't keep doing this. I need something. I still to this day don't know what he said to them, but the officer knocked on the door. He said, mate, wait, they're going to come back in a couple of minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. And they came back on and they said, all right, we've spoken to your lawyer. You can't go to rehab. You're too high risk to the community, but there's a place at Long Bay Prison called Narranura. It's like a rehab, but it's in the prison, and we're going to recommend to send you there. And that was enough. You know what I mean? I was just like, all right, there was hope.
You got another chance.
Yeah, I got another chance. So they did that, and then I was moved out to Long Bay eventually, and I went into Narranura.
And what was that place like? How was it different from the experiences you'd had of jail up to that point?
It was so different. So when I got there, when I was in it, was run at 18 wing right at the back, which is now the mental health unit. But it's a little separate place for about 20 people. So it's completely, no one else apart from the guys in Narranura could get into it. And when I went in there, I had to call the guards by their names, and they had to call me by name.
And that hadn't happened before?
Oh, that'd get you killed if you did that in a jail. No, you their boss or chief, and you're Robinson or 359237. Yeah, it's all dehumanised. And I say, what Narranura did was it rehumanised me, and so, it tried to, and the guards who worked there were therapeutic officers, all volunteered. One of the things they taught me was that I wasn't bad, but my behaviour was unacceptable, and no one had ever said that, ever. I'd always been told since I was a kid, by my parents, by the school, by the police, by the courts and the prison officials, that I was bad. And in the end, you just go, well, I might as well just be bad. I'll just play the part. It's easier. If that's what society thinks of me, I'll just do it.
Is it still going strong, that program?
No, unfortunately, of course, Narranura was the most successful program ever run in New South Wales prisons, so they closed it in 2015. And I spoke at the closing of it, And one of the sad things, they said it was too expensive because it's not a McDonald's model, and it personalised things, and it treated you like a human. And I know personally at least 30 guys who've gone through that program, that the minimum guy's been out 10 years, and some of them are now in their, out 20 years, and not, these guys aren't living in housing commission on methadone. These guys are thriving, like myself. It was such an amazing program, and so short-sighted of the prison officials to close it. So he changed my life, yeah. From there, I got paroled, had to go to rehab after that, which I wasn't happy about because I was on methadone still, so I had to come off methadone. So I went to Who's, We Help Ourselves. And again, there was only 2 places in the world at that stage that took you off methadone. There was Who's in Sydney and there was one in New York, so I was very lucky.
How hard was that?
By that, after going through Narranura, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had 2 things clear. I didn't want to go to jail again, and I didn't want to be on methadone anymore. That's all. That's all I knew. I wanted those 2 things removed. And when I went to Who's, they started taking me to NA, Narcotics Anonymous meetings. And I remember one of the first meetings they took me to, there was a guy who was a year clean that I'd been in prison with and used with, and I knew how crazy he was, And I thought, wow, if he can get clean. And I started hearing people's stories, but I didn't hear people's stories like you might think. I didn't hear guys who'd been in jail. That's not what resonated with me. The message I heard and what I heard, and it didn't matter whether it was male or female, been to jail or not, was I heard people talking about feeling this way that I'd grown up and been not a part of. and that they weren't that way anymore, you know, that they participated in their life and they had relationships and they had trust, you know, and they loved people and people loved them. That's what resonated with me. And, you know, my sponsor, who's still my sponsor today, I heard him, I was like, not very, 60 days clean, 90 days clean or something. And I heard him speak, he wasn't my sponsor at the time, but I heard him speak in this room with like 250 men about the way he loved his wife and his children, and he spoke nothing about her sexual prowess or the way she, like completely, I'd never seen anyone speak like this about the people they loved, especially a man, and convey it to a room full of other men. I'm looking around going, no one's calling him a poor for a fat, you know what I mean? And like, yeah, that little flame that had been kept alive all those years by that hope just ignited. And I went back to the rehab and I said, I heard this bloke share, you know, and his best mate worked at the rehab, and said, oh, yeah, I know that guy. He runs this meeting in Coogee, and I went down there, you know, and I was very lucky that he ran this men's meeting, because one of the things that was really important, I didn't need to just recover from drugs. I needed to learn how to be a real man, and I needed to unlearn all those things that I'd learned, that the where I'd grown up and the way I lived my life, the way I explain it is the loudest, most violent, strongest, wealthiest man always made the rules. Whether it was at home, at school, when I was using, at the police station, you know, that's how the world ran. And these men told me that that's just bullshit, and that doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve the people you love. And they just told me that it was okay to be vulnerable and to be kind. I could let down, you know, the persona, all the things that I believed I needed to carry with me to protect me. I didn't need them anymore. And they taught me that they didn't actually protect me, they actually caused me more harm.
As you're remaking yourself from the inside out, it sounds, Claude, you were also training yourself up. You went to TAFE, learnt community services, started working in different roles, and eventually you get this job that you've got now running Rainbow Lodge. How did you feel walking in there as a manager?
Yeah, it's quite surreal, you know, to be a resident there. I was on the board for about 5 years, and then to be the manager. And I think, you know, sometimes in life things happen, you know, synchronicity, whatever. And I'm not a religious person or anything like that, but I just think, you know, the world gives you opportunities for a reason. And I'm a big believer in, and I say this to the guys at Rainbow Lodge, you know, responsibility is put upon us a lot of the time when we don't want it. But if we're able to do it, we have a responsibility to take that responsibility on. And I just saw this opportunity that was right for me at the time. And I thought, you know, I could, you know, I just thought this is meant to be. I had a big break from it, and I had lots of other experiences. So I was under no illusions, you know, that I had any magical powers.
I imagine it's a place with a lot of big emotions, a lot of people going through really hard stuff, a lot of pain, a lot of sadness. Is there also joy? Is there also laughter, happiness in Rainbow Lodge?
Yeah, no, there is. There is a all the jobs I've done, but especially the men at Rainbow, you know, all their stories are the same. You know, there's half a dozen different versions. They're all traumatised. They're all removed as children, all put into government care, all sexually abused. And this is what's so wrong with our system. These people were taken as children from their families instead of their families being supported, put into care, abused in care, acted out from their trauma, whether it was aggressively or with drugs. So what we did as a society was we'll criminalise the trauma response of children, so we as a society can abdicate our responsibility for putting them into the care of places where they're sexually abused. That's what we did. And when they acted out and all that, we criminalised it, sent them to, you know, boys' homes or children's jails. 79% of the men that came to Rainbow Lodge are in the juvenile justice system. It's an apprenticeship for a lifetime of adult incarceration, and that's our best model. Like, I've got a guy there at the moment. This is his second time there. He's an Aboriginal man in his late 40s. He's been out 18 months now, and it's the longest time he's been out of prison since he was 13. You know, and this guy is so amazing. You know, when he told me his story about being abused in the centre he was removed for, and then his brother came in and he went to his abuser as a 10-year-old and negotiated with his abuser that he could rape him if he didn't rape his brother. And we've spent the next 30 years incarcerating him for that. And that brother went on to kill himself in the prison he was in. You know, these are the people we're working with. These people aren't criminals. Back to the humour. His nickname is the Joker. He is always happy and laughing.
Lots of people, Claude, lose their families when they get into drugs and end up in prison. Is that your story too?
Yep. I think initially, I don't know if I left my family because I thought it was the right thing to do. You know, you think, if you just leave and you don't go back and have contact, you're doing them a favour. Obviously, when I got clean and changed my life, I've realised that wasn't the case at all, that it's a really selfish thing to do. But I did, yeah. And so, I hadn't, my brother visited me once when I was in Goulburn, came and visited me and spoke to me about the inheritance. And I'd done so much damage, and both my brothers, and I'm very lucky, both my brothers have amazing wives or partners, two amazing women who've always taken me into their house when I was trying to come off drugs. They're pretty amazing people, and they and I was very lucky that, both my sister-in-laws and that never told my nieces and nephews that I was bad. They said that I used drugs, and, when I used drugs, I did crime, and the punishment for that in this country when you break the law is that I went to prison. So when I didn't have to make up stories, but I knew this time that I couldn't get out and tell them it was going to be all right. I needed a body of evidence. So I was about 4 years clean and out of prison, and my brother owned a motel I knew in Wodonga, I'd found out. And I was going to Melbourne with my ex-wife at the time, and she said, you should drop in and see your brother. Look, he'll be doing well. And, and I thought, thankfully, I thought, I don't think that's a good idea. So we went to Melbourne. I didn't drop in, but it did make me think, and part of the reason was that I the last time I'd robbed him, I actually owed him an amends and some money. And I rung him up, because I found out the hotel, and I rung it up. He happened to answer the phone, and I said, it's Claude. And, he wasn't very happy. He just said, what do you want? Because I rung up because I wanted something, not to see how him and his family was, And I said, look, I completely understand. I just said, look, I owe you some money and I'd like to pay that money back. That's it. And he said, you're not getting our bank account details, not a chance, He said, send a cheque and here's a post office box, and just hung up. That was it, and I'd worked this out with my sponsor, and so I had the money. So, before I called, and I had the bank check, so it wouldn't bounce, and it was all, and I priority mailed it, and he rang me back, a day or so later in tears, and he said to me, I'm still emotional. He said to me, this is the first time that you've done what you said you were going to do. Yeah, so, then I started taking my family, and I got married in Byron Bay, and my family all come up, and my nieces and nephews, and they slowly came back into my life. And obviously, when the Australian of the Year getting nominated for the local hero thing, they're really proud of that because they've seen the battles and how difficult it was. But, I'm lucky, those things are really important. And to the point, my brother used to own this motel, and we'd go there and everyone would stay for free except me, because I said to him, I can't. I know everyone else can. So, I had an agreement with him, and every time I stayed there, just between me and him, I just pay him some money because I needed to make amends. I wasn't like all the others hadn't robbed you and hurt you and caused grief in your family. And that's why I say both my brother's partners are amazing women, because, they're not related to me, by blood or anything, but they've always stood by me. Yeah.
You're a dad now yourself. What kind of parent do you try to be?
Not like my parents. I know this is bad. Look, I smother. My daughter gets told that I love her,
Too much? Did she say you say it too much?
Yeah, she does, especially now, like when I drop her at school, she's like walking in front, Dad, don't do that, But when we're at home, what I've learned, like I never leave anything unsaid to my daughter. I never let her imagine how I feel about her. Like I don't leave anything to risk. I want her to know that I love her and support her, and that she is really special to me, and that I'll do anything for her. And we have a really amazing relationship,
You talked earlier about that incredible emotional rush that heroin gave you the first time you used it, but it sounds like the love you've got with her blows that out of the water.
Yeah, you're a mother. There's nothing like it. I think for me, my daughter and my obligation to my daughter is a lot about making amends to myself. I just think of, all those things that happened to me, when I was growing up, and the damage that stuff does, and how painful it is, and I just, I know I can't protect her from everything, but I wanted her to know when she's in our house that it's always safe, and she can say to me whatever she wants, and she does. If I get upset or I yell, she'll tell me that I've hurt her feelings, and I can't imagine saying that to my parents. Like I can't hug my daughter or kiss my daughter without her permission. She knows, that she owns her body, and we have a really respectful relationship, and it's I'm very proud of it. I'm blessed, and she's a really, really good kid. But it is the most important relationship in my life, and I put a lot of work in. I went and I've done lots of parenting programs and stuff to learn what's good and what's not. And when I'm given the tools, it's amazing what we can do.
Claude, it's been a real privilege to hear your story. Thank you so much for being my guest on Conversations.
No worries, thank you.
Podcast and broadcast. This is Conversations with Sarah Konowski.
Claude Robinson was my guest on Conversations, and Claude is the manager of the Rainbow Lodge in inner city Sydney, and he was a nominee as a New South Wales local hero in the 2025 Australian of the Year Awards. This conversation was produced by Nicola Harrison and recorded on the lands of the Gadigal people. The executive producer of Conversations is Carmel Rooney. I'm Sarah Konowski. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Sarah Konowski. For more Conversations interviews, head to the website abc.net.au/conversations.